Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And today, guys, we have a giant show for you. We have James Harden, obviously finally getting traded to the Brooklyn Nets, of all teams, the most popular team in the NBA right now, for good or for bad. We also will get into the part of that bad in the Nets and Kyrie Irving. We haven't been able to talk about the whole Kyrie Irving saga yet. We will discuss that along with James Harden and the rest of this giant trade, this blockbuster trade that featured Victor Oladipo, Chris LeVert, and others, and tons of first-round draft picks going to the Nets. We will then dive a little bit into the college football national championship game. We're not going to do a full review, but we will go over the game and go over kind of what we felt after the game about certain players and about the Alabama team as a whole. We also have news about Alabama as well, hiring a new offensive coordinator. We'll get into that. And then, of course, we will get into the NFL playoffs. And before that, we will also discuss Urban Meyer most likely becoming the Jaguars coach. As this morning while we were recording, we are hearing that it is pretty much a done deal in Jacksonville. And then, of course, we'll just do our review for the NFL playoffs, much like we did last week, a full review on each game and get into it. Jared, huge show today. We don't even have time again for our opening segments like we normally would. I did want to mention that the NHL season started last night, so sports are kind of getting back into that big flow, right? We're getting into that, that time of the year where we have NHL, we have the NBA, we have the NFL playoffs. And then, of course, the MLB, spring training, all that stuff should be starting in a month or two. So sports are officially back kind of now, right? We got 3 sports rolling again.
Now that hockey's back, sports are officially back.
I'm just saying, you can kind of turn on your TV, or if you want to bet on some games every single night, you can. Not to mention college basketball. We'll be rolling into March Madness as well. But, Jared, let's get into the NBA. Let's get into non-game action, and that's James Harden getting traded. Real quick, Jared, just your thoughts when you heard that James Harden had been traded, and specifically the Nets, before I get into kind of the details of what the trade means.
I'm happy that this whole saga is over. I tweeted when I first heard about this, I was like, finally, anyone else like excited that this is over and we can actually stop talking about this? It seems like this has been drawn out for years, even though it's only really been an off season, which has been a few months at best. And it's just been so much turmoil, right? From Houston, obviously firing Mike D'Antoni and Daryl Morey, their head coach and GM combo, and basically James Harden from that point, not being able to play with other superstars, right? He's had Russell Westbrook at one point. He's had Dwight Howard at one point, even though Dwight Howard has declined in the last 4 to 5 years. I wouldn't call him a superstar, but still, at the time, he was a good player, and obviously Chris Paul as well. None of those other stars were able to work with James Harden. James Harden also never in his time with the Rockets was able to get out of the second round of the playoffs, right? And so there's so many questions up in the air. We all know how much of a box office superstar James Harden is as an individual. But from a team perspective, could he elevate his team, being that quote-unquote superstar and get them to the promised land, get them to the championship? And so far, he was never able to do that. And so the questions arose. Well, can James Harden play with other superstars, right? Is it James Harden's fault? Is it the other players' fault that they can't work with him? There's so many unanswered questions. And then we got to a certain point to where, James Harden shows up to training camp and the beginning of the season, obviously out of shape, right? He was seen at a strip club, at a party, without a mask, being unprotected and potentially, exposing himself to the coronavirus. And it just didn't seem like he was buying in to the new team that the Houston Rockets had put together. So I'm happy that it's over because, honestly, I want to talk about basketball. And I'm tired of talking about all of this petty stuff that has been going on for the last weeks and more or less couple months.
Well, Jared, we're going to get into that petty stuff, right after I kind of explain this trade, because there's a lot of pettiness going on, specifically with this Nets team that has nothing to do with James Harden. You guys know who we're talking about. Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on this were I was driving, so I was unable to kind of initially, kind of react to this trade. I saw a bunch of my friends texting off my phone. My phone was kind of attached to my dashboard, and I'm like, they're just like all going hard about like talking about Harden and all this stuff, and then I see like to the Nets, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, he doesn't play for the Nets. He plays for the Rockets. Like, he's on the net, So naturally, I look to see what happens with this trade. And this was not just your normal trade. This involved, 4 other teams, a lot of teams that you wouldn't expect to be involved, many stars. So I'll go through it really quickly, and then I'll kind of get into what I think about this Nets team and James Harden being on it. So here's the full trade. The Nets will get James Harden, of course, and a 2024 second-round pick. The Rockets, they get the biggest hole in this whole thing. They get Victor Oladipo from the Pacers, which we'll get into that in a second. Dante Exum from the Cavs, former number 5 overall pick. Radions Karooks, he's the third player that goes to the Rockets.
Never heard of the guy.
And then they get 3 unprotected first-round draft picks in 2022, 2024, and 2026 from the Nets, plus pick swaps with the Nets. 2021 next year, 2023, 2025, 2027. So draft picks are being switched or given to the Rockets.
Draft picks galore.
Yeah, from the Nets, from 2021 to 2027. So crazy whole.
And really quickly, yeah. Just so for some people who may not know, when you say unprotected first round pick, what are you talking about?
I believe that means no matter what, even if it's the number 1 pick, number 2 pick, number 3 pick, you get it. If we remember, Jared, the Lakers kind of benefiting from that bad Dwight Howard trade, that bad Steve Nash trade, where the Lakers were so bad that they were able to get Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, even though they technically had traded those picks away. Those were protected top 3, top 5 picks that the Lakers were still allowed to get those players. So in this case, Brooklyn will not be getting a draft pick now that they've traded them away. If it's the number 1 pick 3 years in a row, if the Nets just suck the next, in 2022, 2024, and 2026, they don't get that draft pick. So the Nets got to hope that this is a long-term thing and that they don't, they're not bad. And here, so they also get, the Rockets also get Cleveland's 2022 first-round pick, which could be actually a pretty solid pick. With that team being one of the bottom half teams in the league, this is big. So now we move to the Pacers. The Pacers were involved. Obviously, I mentioned Victor Oladipo. They get Karis LeVert in a 2023 second-round pick. So essentially, they kind of swap Oladipo for LeVert. And the Cavaliers in this trade get Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince from the Nets, kind of depth guys, younger players for the Nets. So, a giant trade here. I'm going to start with the Nets, Jared, because obviously this is the team that has now 3 superstars. They have Kyrie Irving, maybe. They have James Harden. Yeah. They have Kevin Durant. And the rest of their starting lineup goes as this. It will be Joe Harris, also in this lineup, kind of a 3-point specialist. And then DeAndre Jordan and Jeff Green at center. After that, this team's bench kind of sucks. And what's funny about this trade is I get it. You get the 3 stars. You have now James Harden. You have Kyrie Irving. You have Kevin Durant. And you have good depth in the rest of the starting lineup with Joe Harris and DeAndre Jordan. But what the hell else? Right? Like Timothy Lawahu Cabaret, Landry Shamet, Bruce Bowen. I thought Bruce Bowen retired. I guess he's still on this team. No, I'm joking.
Bruce Bowen.
It's his son.
The Spurs.
yeah. But so it's like they got like a depth of like 6 or 7 guys now. When they, Jared, I think we agreed, had the most depth in the NBA before this trade. So what are your thoughts? Because I think this is, I get the stars. I get having the stars. But what do you think about this lack of bench depth? And essentially, that it's non-existent now. And that they're completely relying on these 3 sort of head cases. I'll just throw it out there to lead this team without any bench, essentially.
Well, that's the reason I think why the Rockets accepted this trade was because the Nets had the most to give up, right? When you're talking about a superstar box office talent, a dude that's making close to $40 million a year, right? If you're the Rockets, you're not going to give him up for peanuts and for chump change. And so it's almost like it was a little different scenario, but the same thing when the Lakers traded for Anthony Davis. You have to almost give up the farm. Yes, the Lakers had at the time good depth and bench players and Josh Hart, and obviously Brandon Ingram was a budding superstar. We know that he signed that major max extension, proving that he's worth that superstar or at least all-star status. So, but you have to give up, some of those depth players and even good to great players in order to get the box office superstar. So it's not surprising to me that Houston chose to go this route because the Nets simply had the most to give up. So basically what we're saying is you're right. It is on Kevin Durant, James Harden, and hopefully Kyrie Irving if he ever decides to show up. But here's the thing, Nick. In this crazy year with COVID still very much alive and very much affecting the NBA, as we've seen this week, if I'm not mistaken, 9 NBA games have already been postponed just this week, right? So at any moment, any one of these players on the Nets, and I'm talking about the 3 superstars who I just mentioned, can contract the coronavirus and potentially be out for 2 weeks. Kyrie Irving already has missed like 2 weeks out of this season, right? So what happens if Kevin Durant and or James Harden, obviously I don't want this to happen, but hypothetically, if one of them gets coronavirus or even both of them, what are they going to do, right? They're going to go from potentially one of the best teams on paper to literally the worst team.
No, that's what I'm saying, Jerry. It's kind of puzzling that, especially with the news that one of your superstars just isn't showing up to work, and now we see him, partying with his sister without a mask, not giving a crap about anything going on. Why they trade everybody for a guy that's essentially had the same issues this year, not playing, going to clubs, overweight, is just it's very it's challenging for me to understand this trade. I get the Nets want to win a championship, but Jared, I already thought they could win a championship with the team they already had. I mean, maybe this is a sign that they're going to move on from Kyrie Irving, and maybe they'll get some back for Kyrie Irving. I don't know, but I don't understand why you give up everything for a guy that has troubles, clearly.
Well,
in James Harden.
I'll say this to defend James Harden, right? I'm not the biggest James Harden fan in the world. I respect his game. I think he's an offensive genius, probably one of the top 5, easily top 10 offensive talents in NBA history. I'll say this about James Harden. I think he was acting out purposely to get out of Houston. I don't think that is James Harden's normal mentality. To be honest, when you look through his career, obviously the majority of it with the Houston Rockets and his early career when he was drafted by the Oklahoma City Thunder, James Harden didn't miss games. Right? I know he's been injured before, but other than injuries, he does not miss games. He's never acted out in his career before, and he's never kind of pulled the stunts that he did this offseason. I think that was a specific mindset that he had going in to literally upset the Houston Rockets so much that they had no other choice but to trade him, right? I think Kyrie Irving is on a whole different planet, right? That dude, first of all, thinks the earth is flat, right? And his brain is just wired differently. So while I think Kyrie Irving's heart is in the right place, right? He wants to he wants to be at the forefront of social justice issues, and he wants to be a leader in that aspect, which is fantastic. But the problem I have is, why can't you do that and do your job, right? There are plenty of guys in this league, like LeBron James, Chris Paul, Giannis Antetokounmpo, plenty of other dudes in this league who are at the forefront and are one of the first ones to speak up about social justice issues and other things that happen in this world, but yet they still seem to show up to practice on time, show up to meetings, right? Show up to film sessions, and most importantly, show up on game day when your team needs you, right? When you are getting paid $33.4 million. Yeah. So, like I said, I think James Harden and Kyrie Irving are two in two separate worlds, because James Harden was doing this for a specific reason to get out. I think James Harden is going to be, a saint from now on, because he got what he wanted. He got out of Houston and he gets to play with his buddy Kevin Durant, who he initially played with in Oklahoma City. Kyrie Irving, whole different story. And you're right. I don't know, honestly, if he's going to be on this team going forward.
Well, and here's the thing. So let's get into Kyrie Irving, because this is, I've tried to stay off social media talking about this, because infuriates me what's going on with Kyrie Irving. Like, I understand. If you look at the timeline of this entire thing, he doesn't play the national televised TNT game the other night. I believe it was against the 76ers. Nobody knows where he is. Steve Nash doesn't know where he is. And the rumor was that what had happened at the Capitol was the reason that he wasn't playing, which made sense. Like you mentioned, it was, he's been into social justice. He's one of the Players Association vice presidents, or he is the vice president of the national, the association. That's kind of crazy in itself. As ridiculous as that sounds. And I can understand. He was at the forefront when the Black Lives Matter stuff was happening. He was saying they shouldn't play the season. And so I understood that. So then, I've been celebrating my anniversary with my girlfriend last few days. So I haven't been up.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Jared. I've been kind of out of the sports loop a bit, which is one of the reasons why I didn't get the Harden news for a few hours. I heard again. I was like, oh, wait, Kyrie Irving's still not playing? He's that beat up about the Capitol stuff? Like, he's still not playing? And then you hear the rumors not the rumors, you see the actual evidence that he's partying with his sister. Now, we don't know the date of when this happened, but regardless, that's a COVID violation. You can't do that. And it looks really bad when he's not playing. But so, Jared, if he is celebrating with his sister, confetti, alcohol, no mask, while also not playing, while also getting paid $33.5 million or whatever you said.
33.4.
Yeah, Jared, that doesn't look good at all. And if I'm the Nets and if I'm the NBA as a whole, I go, what the hell is going on? Who do you think you are? Like, why does Kyrie Irving, like you mentioned, think that he can do whatever he wants, not play, party, when every single other NBA player is doing that? Like, who does Kyrie think what has he essentially accomplished in this NBA career that he thinks he could just skip games and not do anything? I get it. He won a championship with LeBron. And then he decided, you know what? I want to be the number one guy. I'm going to leave. Doesn't work out in Boston. Is so far not working out with the Nets. Before that with the Cavs, there was even, rumors of, friction even before they won the championship. He's always been injury prone. Like, who does this guy think he really is? I think he should be punished to the full extent. Like, this guy needs to be fined. He needs to be suspended for COVID-19 violations. He needs to be stripped of that vice presidency of the NBA Players Association, because how is this guy showing any leadership? He's showing the least amount of leadership you possibly can in this situation. And I think of the Nets, you absolutely have to explore, possibly getting rid of this guy, because you have James Harden, you have Kevin Durant. Why do you need Kyrie Irving at this point if he's just going to be a distraction and you don't even know if he's going to play or not? This is not the type of issue where, okay, he took off a game or two, maybe he's a little load management. No, he's just not showing up for work, Jared. When people don't show up for work, they get fired. So I'm interested to see how this Kyrie Irving thing plays out. I hope that he wasn't partying during this absence. But if he was, punished to the full extent. And I think this guy needs a wake-up call, because I think, you talk about the earth is flat, all that stuff. This guy's head's wired a little different. And when you're not showing up for work, that's when kind of things get a little worse.
Yeah, I think Kyrie Irving right now, I think he's trying to be like a full-on philanthropist, right? He's which is fantastic, right? And there's nothing wrong with pouring your efforts into that and giving your time and energy and resources and obviously the money that he has to make this world a better place and act on that. Problem is, you also have an obligation to the Brooklyn Nets, which you signed a contract, right? I'm sure he still wants to get his paycheck. In order to get your paycheck, you've got to go out and perform on the court. And so to me, you're right, Nick. I think if I'm the Brooklyn Nets, I am exercising, every opportunity I can. I'm going to find the dude. Like, he's not getting his game checks because he's not showing up, right? He should be stripped of his, vice president duty of the NBA or the Players Association, because to me, in order to be like the president or the vice president or the leader of that Players Association, you have to be able to lead both ways, right? On and off the court. I would say that he's leading off the court. He's doing a lot of good things off the court, but that's only 50% of what that job technically entails. He's not doing the other 50. So I would say first and foremost, stop giving him game checks. Like there has to be something in the contract that says if you don't show up to work, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you are injured or if you're in the COVID-19 protocol, those are two separate things. But if you are healthy, do not have COVID, and you're just simply not showing up for work, your head coach doesn't even know where you are, and then you randomly show up on a call, right? On a Zoom call, and like that's the first sighting that people have seen from you in a couple of days. Yeah, you don't deserve to get paid. And who knows? I mean, maybe that's what it'll take for him to wake up in a sense and get back to work. I don't know what will. Maybe it'll be this James Harden trade, right? And say, oh, hey, we got the big three now. Who knows? But it's just, you're right. I think at this point, the only one who really knows is Kyrie Irving. He's in his own head right now. We can do all the speculation that we want, and we can talk about this and that. But at the end of the day, it's got to be up to Kyrie Irving. He's got to want to come back and want to play. And why wouldn't you want to play with the likes of a Kevin Durant and a James Harden to potentially win another NBA title? I mean, isn't that why you went to Brooklyn?
Yeah, no, and here's the thing. You kind of, if the Nets want to give him, one more chance, they go, hey, okay, we got you James Harden, bro. Like let's play now. Like, what are we doing? So I do think that if you give Kyrie one more chance, that's it. Like if Kyrie starts doing this stuff again later this season and just starts not showing up, like you're saying, I think the Nets have to perform action. I understand it. It's a weird time. Obviously, like we mentioned, Kyrie Irving wants to help outside of the NBA. The thing is, though, you have that platform because of the NBA. So you're slapping the NBA and the Nets in the face when you don't play and you just collect their checks. It's a douche move that he's performing here. And so, prove to us that you just needed that break and that you're going to come back and you're going to ball out like you did on opening night, or like he had the few games he's played, right? Because him and Kevin Durant looked awesome. I can't imagine what this is going to look like with James Harden on this team, but nonetheless, I hope Kyrie gets right. But if he doesn't and he's just taking advantage of the system, I hope he gets punished, like I would anybody else in this situation. Because there's been plenty of guys that have done this. The Rodmans and the guys like that just leave. They end up getting punished, right? And so stuff happens. Jared, real quick, what's your thoughts on Oladipo going to the Rockets? Now that team is John Wall, Oladipo, Christian Wood, DeMarcus Cousins, Eric
Cousins, right.
Roster. What's your take on this Rockets team now that they don't have James Harden, but they add Oladipo?
I mean, they might improve a little bit. Obviously, I think their record is like 3-9 or something like that. They're obviously pretty bad, and that was with James Harden, who, let's just face it, wasn't really 100% giving his full effort, right? DeMarcus Cousins came out in a post-game interview and basically said that James Harden had been disrespecting the entire team since the season started. So that's a comment right there. Listen, Victor Oladipo, he's a good player. He's been an all-star, I believe, once in his career, but he obviously had that nasty injury, and I think he's probably still coming back from that. I don't know if he's actually full 100% go. For Houston, you're right. You mentioned all those draft picks, right? They got draft picks for days until 2027, but they never really got that budding potential superstar, I think, that they wanted. And if I'm not mistaken, Victor Oladipo is like in his late 20s, which obviously that's like the prime of your career, but it's not like he's 21, 22, and you can like build a franchise around this guy. I think the main attraction and why there are so many rumors about James Harden going to the Philadelphia 76ers was because the Sixers had Ben Simmons. And I think the Houston Rockets really wanted Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is like 23, 24. Obviously, the only thing that he lacks is shooting. He has everything else. He's a little bit of Magic Johnson, mixed with LeBron James, maybe not as thick, but still, like he is. You can, if you get him in the right system, the guy can be a budding superstar. So, Victor Oladipo, nice player, can potentially be an all-star for you, but is this going to catapult Houston into the playoffs now? maybe as the 8th seed or like that play-in seed, but I don't think this really does much for Houston so far from what we've seen, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Houston has enough when you obviously talk about the Lakers and the Clippers and, the Nuggets and the other teams that we've kind of talked about who are in that elite category. Houston's just not there. So they might, if they're lucky, squeak in to the playoffs, but I mean, they're getting bounced right away. This is more of a rebuild. For the next couple of years, we're going to try to utilize those draft picks that we got and turn those into other great players.
Yeah, and Jared, I'm not saying they're a top team in the NBA, but I do think that if you have all, 3 of their kind of stars healthy, this is a pretty good basketball team. John Wall can get back to the John Wall we all remember from a few years ago. He's a great point guard. Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. You got to be healthy. If DeMarcus Cousins can somewhat get to a level of what he used to be, if Oladipo can play like, the couple of years that we've seen with Orlando and Indiana, again, it's a pretty solid team. It's in that, it's in that middle tier. And again, they can do this because they have the draft picks the next few years, right? And so they can, they can do this. They don't have to have these superstars because they can just rebuild in the draft, for a couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Rockets. Pacers get Karis LeVert. I think Karis LeVert is a very, very solid player. It'll be interesting to see what he does with Indiana by himself, much like Oladipo did. Not really sure why Jarrett Allen went to the Cavs because they already have Andre Drummond. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. And I'm excited at least to see James Harden's debut with the Nets. I hope it's with Kyrie and Durant. I'll be tuning in whenever that happens. All right, switching over to college football. We obviously had the last game of the season. That was the national championship between Alabama and Ohio State. Not the best game, Jared. It was pretty good, in the first half, first quarter, midway through the second quarter, and then it started getting a little out of hand. Alabama ends up winning the game 52-24. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but we didn't want to leave it out. We had Trey Sermon get injured on the first drive of the game, kind of affecting Ohio State's rushing attack. And then, Ohio State just couldn't stop Devontae Smith at all. Literally, Devontae Smith might have broken some national championship records if he hadn't got a little beat up in the second half.
Bad dude.
Yeah, no. So, you have Najee Harris ended up with 4 touchdowns, 79 yards rushing and receiving. That's each, not 79 yards total. Mac Jones, over 450 yards, 5 touchdown passes. Jared, what's your thoughts? Alabama does what they're supposed to do. They win by 4 touchdowns. What's your thoughts after this game on both these teams and these players?
For Alabama, simply juggernaut. Like when you look up juggernaut, in the dictionary, it's going to say Alabama. Simply, very, very simply, it's going to say Alabama. 2020, at least from an offensive perspective, we can say defensively, maybe this isn't Nick Saban's greatest defensive team. Once again, I've said this on the show. This team is very young on the defensive side of the ball, right? They have freshmen and sophomores playing at a lot of key positions. And so I think it took them some time. They've developed and gotten better as the season has gone on because they did give up a couple 30-point games. But because this offense was so elite, right, the defense didn't have to necessarily be great. All they had to do was be good. They could have even been average. And Alabama was going to average 40 to 45 points a game, and it wasn't going to matter. So, listen, I think Mac Jones has been one of the biggest surprises, at least so far for this season. And it's almost like a somewhat of a mirror image of last year when Joe Burrow burst onto the scene with LSU, right? Obviously, Joe Burrow started his career at Ohio State, ended up transferring to LSU. But at the beginning of last season, Nick, I'm pretty sure you and I did not know who Joe Burrow was, right? I mean, literally, Joe Burrow burst onto the scene like nothing. Mac Jones was I think he was a 4-star recruit. So, nothing to like cry about, but he wasn't really on the scene. It was all about Tua, and it was all about the weapons that this Alabama team has produced over the last couple of years. And it was like, okay, can Mac Jones basically be that game manager? And he showed, I'm more than just a game manager, right? Like I can sling that rock, and it doesn't hurt when you've got the likes of Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, who was obviously injured for most of the year. But when you have those type of weapons, your job as a quarterback becomes a lot easier. So for me, this was all about Alabama. I picked Alabama to win in the beginning. Ohio State in the first quarter hung in there, but Alabama hung 28 on them in the second quarter and basically blew this game wide open. Last thing I'll say before I hand it to you, Devontae Smith, 12 receptions, 215, and 3 touchdowns in the first half. And the only reason he didn't play in the second half was because I don't know if he broke a finger or he did something to his hand, and obviously, like other than his legs, he needs his hands to catch. And the game was out of reach anyway, so there's no point to really rush Devontae Smith back into the game. So that's why he didn't play the second half. But can you imagine if he played the second half? Like, dude might have had 20 receptions for 350 and 5 scores. I mean, we just don't know. He was like, it didn't matter who was on him. Sean Wade, Ohio State's best corner, got burned a couple times. At one point, Devontae Smith's third touchdown, Ohio State put a linebacker on Devontae Smith.
No.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I think they were trying to confuse Alabama. Like, our corners can't get to him, so let's try to confuse him and, like, show. But a linebacker on Devontae Smith, one of the fastest players in all of college football. Ohio State just didn't have any answers. It was simply an ass whooping, man. Plain and simple.
Yeah, no, and that's what some of us expected. Other people thought that Justin Fields would ball out and be the number 1 pick and stuff like that, but that's not what ended up happening.
Who was that?
That would be, I think, Jared, I think we had him on our show last week. It'd be the RKJ man. And I just want to go over Justin Fields' stats because I know he'll likely be watching. 194 pass yards, 1 touchdown pass, and 67 rush yards. Right? So, Jared, usually when a quarterback is down by 28 and down a whole game, their passing yards rack up, right? Like, and we talked about Dak Prescott with the Cowboys this year. His yards were so high.
Whoa, amen. Don't be taking any unnecessary shots.
You know it's the truth. Go back to the early podcast and I'll explain
it. Keep going.
Okay,
Keep going.
But plenty of other quarterbacks do this too. Trevor Lawrence last week. Mac Jones. Mac Jones was never down in games, but still, it's just that's what happened. So, what happened? Why did Justin Fields not? Why did he just not perform? Because they didn't have Trey Sermon. I think that's one of the reasons. I think you actually brought up a good point that I was also going to bring up last week, saying that look at when Trey Sermon's running for 200, 300 yards, any quarterback's going to find guys open. All of a sudden, Trey Sermon disappears. Master Teague is good, but he's not great. Like, he's not great level running back. And look what ended up happening. Ohio State couldn't compete. They were in it for a little bit because they were taking time off the clock. But then, once they started punting or kicking field goals and stuff like that, it was over because they didn't have all their weapons. And Justin Fields just wasn't enough. So I think, guys, Trevor Lawrence is number 1 pick, right? Fields is a great quarterback. He'll be a top 3 pick in the draft, as far as quarterbacks go. And, he potentially could be a great quarterback. Do I think he's going to be the next Russell Wilson like a lot of people were comparing? I don't think so. I mean, the guy's, he's only played a few games and he's lost a lot of big games as well. So, we'll just see. But I think after this game, you look at this Alabama team and you go, is this one of the best teams ever? I think you have to put them in that top 10. I don't know if they're even better than the LSU team last year, to be honest, because that team was amazing and had, similar types of offensive weaponry. But I mean, this team's going to have like 5 first-round picks. Right. They have a 5-star recruit quarterback, one of the top 3 recruits from a few years ago that was here from local modern day high school. And so they're going to rebuild and they're going to be great again next year. Ohio State, I'm sure they will be as well. And so we'll see these teams down the line. But, very, 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 very not so interesting game. And we'll see what ends up happening with all these players. Now, Jared, so a couple some news to come out about Alabama before we transition into the NFL. Alabama, they lose Steve Sarkisian to Texas after this game. Sarkisian coming up with a great game plan to win this national championship. He moves on to Texas with, I believe, their offensive line coach. So Alabama has replenished with old Bill O'Brien as their offensive coordinator. Just thoughts on that. What do you think about O'Brien kind of really downgrading from an NFL GM and a head coach to offensive coordinator at Alabama?
It's not surprising. I mean, listen, like Steve Sarkisian wasn't a GM when he was last in the NFL, but if you want to revitalize your career, right? If you're kind of in the slumps, what do? You go to Alabama, or if you're in the NFL already, you go to the Patriots. I mean, like it's seriously that simple. You go to one of those teams as a coordinator or even an assistant coordinator, and you stay there for 2 to 3 years. And watch, I guarantee 2 to 3 years, Bill O'Brien's name is going to start to pop up again, and he's going to get interviews for head coaching positions in the NFL and in college football. Let's also remember Bill O'Brien kind of made a name for himself at Penn State before he took the head coaching job with the Houston Texans in the NFL. Yeah. So he's been in the college ranks before. It's not like he's always been in the NFL and never jumped down. To me, I mean, listen, it's Nick Saban doing his thing again. He poaches another NFL coach with head coaching experience down to the college ranks. So it's another recruiting tactic because now he can go to all those kids that he's recruiting, sit in their homes and talk to the kids and the parents and say, yeah, we lost our offensive coordinator, but we're getting a dude that just came from the NFL and just worked with Deshaun Watson for the last 4 years, right? So that's we can say at least in the college ranks, Bill O'Brien was an offensive genius. We'll see if he can do that same thing again. Obviously, with the weapons that Alabama produces, it shouldn't be that hard. But like I said, 2 to 3 years, Bill O'Brien's name is going to resurface for head coaching positions. And it's just what you do. It's a smart move on Bill O'Brien's part. Like if you're Alabama and Nick Saban, maybe I have a couple more questions. But if you're Bill O'Brien, there's no doubt. You say, where do I sign? I don't care if I have to go there for free. Yeah. Because in a couple years, you're going to get paid again. So, yeah, good for him.
Yeah, when you look at coordinators for Alabama, many of them have succeeded, like you're mentioning. It goes back to, even some of them being in NFL coaches. Like I believe Neusmeyer was the offensive coordinator for them for 2 years, around when they were winning national championships in 2012, 2013. He is now the quarterback's coach for the Cowboys. Other guys, there's a head coach at Maryland that used to be an offensive coordinator. Of course, Kirby Smart at Georgia, Brian Dable. If you guys didn't know, he was an offensive coordinator at Alabama. He might be becoming a head coach after, revitalizing the Bills' offense for the first time in 25 years. Lane Kiffin, head coach at Ole Miss. And the list goes on. And defensively, it might even be better. So, yeah, Alabama, they'll replenish Bill O'Brien, as long as he's not GM, like Nick Saban said, kind of in his press conference, he's good. And O'Brien will just be able to focus on offense, and he will get a job. And it's not like Bill O'Brien was a bad head coach in the NFL either or at Penn State. He just got a little over the top, over his head with the GM role. And I think this will lower him down, just like Sarkisian, who had alcohol issues at USC. He gets into the Alabama system, and now he's the head coach of Texas. So we'll see what happens with that. Speaking of former college coaches, Jared, we're going to start off the NFL segment before we get into the playoffs talking about the major rumors that Urban Meyer is going to be the Jaguars coach. Jaguars have the #1 pick. They might draft Trevor Lawrence. They might draft Justin Fields, whoever they want, right? This team has the most cap space. Here's what I think about this first. It's going to be really interesting because Urban Meyer, obviously a career college coach, much like Nick Saban. When Nick Saban went to the NFL, wasn't successful because you don't get to pick from the best players anymore. So how will Urban Meyer do? I don't know. He's going to be getting paid likely a lot of money. But this is kind of, for me, it's wait and see. I don't really know how this is going to go because Urban Meyer, he was successful at Florida. He was successful at Ohio State. Obviously, a lot of turmoil behind the scenes. So hopefully that doesn't follow him to Jacksonville. But I think, he essentially gets to recruit whatever free agency he wants with all this, this $100 million plus cap he has. He gets to pick the #1 pick. I believe they have a second first-round pick as well in this draft. They're going to have the number 33 pick as well. So he does get to pick some of the best college football players and rebuild this roster. And I think if you're signing Urban Meyer, you give him as many years as you possibly can to work it. I don't think you fire him if he has a couple bad years because this team is not that talented. But for me, it's wait and see. And Jared, if they're somewhat successful next year, I'll give him credit. If they aren't, I'm still going to give him the chance to 2-3 years down the line to do better. But for me, I don't really know what to think about this. It's a big name. It's good for the Jaguars, and hopefully it improves the NFL. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, no, the wait and see approach, I think, is like a good way to phrase this, because you're right. Urban Meyer, to my knowledge, has never coached in the NFL, right? He's exclusively made a name for himself in college football, won 3 national championships, 2 with Florida, 1 with Ohio State. So obviously his feet are entrenched in college football. He should be like the greatest scout in the entire NFL, right? And obviously having the #1 overall pick, that's not going to be very hard. You take Trevor Lawrence, you have him as your quarterback for the next 15 years, and you build around that with the rest of your early draft picks that you have. So from a draft standpoint, that shouldn't be as big of an issue. He should be able to really jump right in and already have seeds planted across all of the college football landscape as far as players that he's scouted and that type of thing. But you're right. I mean, we don't know what he's going to be like in the NFL. There are a lot of head coaches that come from the college ranks to the NFL, and it simply doesn't work out because it's just different. You go from dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-olds who still are in college and taking classes, and their entire life isn't football, to all of a sudden you're dealing with grown men who are 30 years old making millions of dollars, and you can't just talk to them a certain way, right? They're grown men. They're making money. This is their living now. So I'm not saying that it won't work out, but I'm not going to sit here and say that Urban Meyer is going to be the next Bill Belichick. We just don't know. And you're right, because Jacksonville is so, I mean, they suck, and they've sucked for the last, like, when was the last time Jacksonville was good? I think it was 3 years ago when they had that one kind of like random year with Blake Bortles where they went to the playoffs and they beat the Patriots. But other than that one fluke season, they had been below 500, and the definition of mediocre. So it's going to take time. And I think you brought up a good point. Even in the next 2 to 3 years, if this team is not winning, I think you still have to give Urban Meyer time. You have to give him time to implement his own system, bring in his own players. Another interesting point, the Jaguars are also still looking for a GM. So it's interesting that they're potentially going to hire Urban Meyer as their head coach without first hiring a GM. That tells me that Urban Meyer might have some say in who the GM is. Typically, in most case scenarios, when a team loses both their head coach and GM, you hire the GM first, and the GM is a part of the hiring process of getting the head coach. The Jaguars are basically doing this in reverse order. We'll see if it works out for them, but it's interesting to talk about, right? Obviously, because of the success that Urban Meyer's had in college. Last point I'll bring up before I bring it back to you, right? And I hope that this doesn't happen. But if you look at the reasons why Urban Meyer had to, retire for the first time at Florida, and then the reason why he left Ohio State, it wasn't because those teams sucked and they stopped getting talent and they lost. It's because of Urban Meyer's health. He's had health issues and significant health issues in his past that's caused him to step away from the game and basically say, listen, if you keep coaching at the pace you are, lack of sleep, travel, all of these things combined, it is going to significantly hinder you as he gets older. So, you're right. Give him a 5-6 year contract, but will Urban Meyer be with this team in 5-6 years? Yeah, I hope so. But I think that's something that we can't overlook, is the health aspect of him as the head coach.
Yeah, no, and it's what helps your health more than stressing about NFL 35-year-olds. That is just and having to play potentially Deshaun Watson if he stays in Indianapolis, having to play the Colts, having to play all these teams 2 times a year, and playing against the Patriots and Bill Belichick. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Urban Meyer. The one thing I think you look at with him is, besides Florida and Ohio State, before that, he earned his coaching ranks from building up teams like Bowling Green and Utah. And so, right. Yeah. So he's essentially going to be able to try to do that again with the Jaguars. They're the #1 pick. They're the worst team in the league. And let's see if he can do it. But I'm at least playing a wait-and-see game. I know it'll be interesting, Jared, also to see who his coordinators are and all that stuff, and to see who ends up hiring. Maybe he'll steal Ryan Day from Ohio State. You never know. Just saying. All right, so let's move to the NFL playoffs. We're not going to be talking about the worst team in the league anymore. We're not going to be talking about #1 draft picks. We're going to be talking about some of the best teams in the NFL. We'll do it chronologically like we did last week. We'll be starting with Rams-Packers, then move to Ravens-Bills, Browns-Chiefs, and then end with Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, Buccaneers versus Saints. But let's start with Rams-Packers, Jared. Interesting matchup. You have one of the best defenses in the NFL versus one of the best offenses. You have the Cal quarterbacks going after each other. You have Jalen Ramsey versus Devontae Adams. That's going to be interesting to watch. So what's your first thoughts on this game, Jared? The Rams surprised the Seahawks. We both believe the Seahawks would win. The Rams kind of controlled that game and really beat them down. And then you had the Packers having the 1 week bye. They haven't slowed down since essentially the middle of the season. So what do you think about this game, and who do you think ends up winning?
Yeah, if the Rams were at full strength, at full health, obviously everyone's banged up, but I'm talking about like legitimate injuries that could potentially keep players out of this game. If the Rams were healthy, I would give them a legitimate chance. Green Bay right now, and the way that Aaron Rodgers is playing, is at an MVP all-time level, and I think he's not only motivated by having a 13-3 record last year, not winning the Super Bowl, but then the Packers come back in this last draft and they draft his potential successor and Jordan Love from Utah State, right? So instead of getting weapons and pieces for Aaron Rodgers to use and build around, they basically said, we're going to draft your successor. And so I think Aaron Rodgers has basically come out and said, all right, I'm going to show you guys why you messed up and why I'm still going to play in this league for the next 5 to 6 years. And he has done nothing short of that. For the Rams, it's very simple. If Aaron Donald plays, they have a chance. If he doesn't, game over. Might as well not even show up. And it's crazy to me to say that a defensive tackle has such a presence on a game, but that's how good Aaron Donald is. That's the reason why he's the highest paid defensive player, or at the time that he signed his contract, he became the highest paid defensive player in the history of the NFL for a defensive tackle, because he disrupts the game in that type of way, right? If I don't care who you are, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, some of the best quarterbacks in the league. If you get pressure up the middle in your face, it's tough to succeed. You can get pressure from the outside, right, from the end position, because you can still step up in the pocket and see where you want to throw. But when Aaron Donald is coming in your face, it's a lot tougher to be able to step up and see your targets and your receivers. So, listen, it's going to be in Green Bay. There's going to be potential for snow. Obviously, the Rams are a West Coast team. They play in a dome. They're not used to playing in cold weather either. So I think that there's a lot of things that are going Green Bay's way. But very simply, if Aaron Donald plays, they have a chance. If Aaron Donald doesn't play, it's a wrap.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, this game is going to be about health. You're right, Jared, because if Jared Goff, his finger isn't working correctly and he can't throw the ball. That,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I even think that's the bigger issue, because John Wolford ended up in a hospital last game.
They said he's good to go, though. Fortunately, they said it was just a stinger and he can't play.
John Wolford being good to go doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, Jared, I'm just going to say. If John Wolford's the starting quarterback for the Rams, they lose. And they're going to lose big and bet the house on the Packers, right? If Jared Goff plays, it's whether he can kind of play like he did last week, right? He came into that game, was able to play. Now, the Seahawks defense, like we kind of predicted, they probably wouldn't be able to win a Super Bowl this year. Did I think first round exit? No, but that's when you have a terrible defense. That's what happens. Guys with small hands and broken fingers can beat you in a playoff game, and that's Jared Goff. So Jared Goff's healthy, and he's able to throw the ball around enough. The Rams have a chance. Like you mentioned, if Aaron Donald plays, you have a stout run defense, and you have Jalen Ramsey on one of the best wide receivers in the game. They have a chance. But if you're right, if those two guys, that will agree with you completely, are unhealthy, especially don't play, they lose this game. I will say this. Devontae Adams really getting stopped by Jalen Ramsey. I think that legitimately gives the Rams a chance. Because if you can get Aaron Donald, you can get those guys pressuring Aaron Rodgers, the rest of the receivers on that team are not stout receivers. They're average, middle-of-the-road receivers like Valdez-Scantling and like Lazard, and Tanyan's an average tight end. There's not much firepower on offense besides Devontae Adams. in the receiving ranks. You, of course, have Aaron Jones. But again, if the Rams can focus on Aaron Jones and they know that Jalen Ramsey is going to do his job against Davante Adams, of course they can win this game. Defense wins championships, Jared. And so I'm giving the Rams a chance if they are healthy. Am I going to predict that happens? No, because the Packers are averaging 31 points a game. Do I think they can get to that? Maybe in this game. Again, it's a great defense, and I don't think the Rams are just going to get blown out in this game. It will be close regardless. I just think, the Packers are running on all cylinders, the balance of their offense. Aaron Rodgers seems to be having one of his best years ever. When you look at a team with a great quarterback, you always have a chance, and the Packers defense is good enough to stop a quarterback with a broken finger or a backup quarterback that's played one NFL game and that has no run game, and their receivers are banged up and stuff like that. So I'm going to go the Packers in this game, but I want to just let everybody know, the Rams, if they are healthy, they have a chance. Any good defense can win. Remember the Broncos. They were winning with Brock Osweiler and Peyton Manning, who was like half a guy going out there barely being able to throw the ball. So in this game, if everybody's healthy, the Rams have a chance. It's not going to be a blowout, but I'm going to pick the Packers. I'm going to go the Packers 31-21 in this game.
31-20. Listen, you're right? After Davante Adams, the receiving core and running back core completely drops off. Aaron Rodgers, one thing that makes him so great is he makes other players better, right?
Yeah.
Like Tunyon, the tight end. Who the heck was he? We didn't even know him in the beginning of the year. He came on like halfway through the year, and all of a sudden this guy's catching 3 touchdown passes a game. That's what Aaron Rodgers does. He makes other players better. So that's why I say it's got to be Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald has to disrupt Aaron Rodgers. He has to cut the head off the snake. If you do that, I think that is even more of a way that the Rams win as opposed to Jalen Ramsey simply silencing Davante Adams, because you still got Aaron Rodgers who can make other players better. You take Aaron Rodgers away, and I think that's more of a recipe for success. I'm going to go Green Bay 27, the Rams 17.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, we're giving the Rams a chance. So we both have 10-point victories for Green Bay. They'll do enough to win. And, I think the Packers are a top 3 team in the NFL right now. And if they really show it against the Rams, I'll say this, Jared, against the number 1 defense, we might be talking about the Packers being Super Bowl champions this year. Because I think if you can beat that type of defense, you can beat anybody, right? And I think they have enough offensive weaponry to beat, play a team like the Chiefs and compete with them and any other team that they would come up and potentially play next week, and being the Buccaneers or Saints. So, yeah, Packers have a chance really to silence some critics and move forward from that bad loss in the NFC Championship game last year and show that Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks in the universe, if not the best quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this game. Hopefully everybody's healthy for the Rams so that we have a solid game to start off the weekend. Now, let's move to what I think, Jared, is the best game this weekend, and that is the Ravens at the Bills.
No doubt.
So much firepower in this game. Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Mark Andrews. That's just the Ravens. You have the Bills. Josh Allen's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Stephon Diggs. There's just so much that goes into this game. This is the hardest game it's been for me to pick. So, Jared, I'll naturally give it to you to start off the review. I want to get some of your takes on this game because, Jared, I'm at least leaning a bit to the Ravens because I think they have a bit of more momentum coming in this game, especially after the 2 games the 2 teams played. But what's your thought on this, and how can each team win this game?
I mean, flip a coin, man. Like,
seriously,
you can legitimately make an argument for both teams. And I'll start with the Ravens and how they kind of got that monkey off their back last week and beating Tennessee in Tennessee. Let's remember, Tennessee already beat Baltimore in Baltimore during the regular season. And last playoffs, Tennessee shocked the world and beat Baltimore, and Baltimore was one of the hottest teams in the playoffs. So I think that was a big statement win for Baltimore. Obviously not just to move into the second round of the playoffs, but for Baltimore to kind of get Tennessee off their back and say, okay, we beat that team that obviously has King Henry, the NFL rushing leader, over 2,000 yards, and they kind of neutralized Derrick Henry all game. So for Baltimore, I think they've got a lot of confidence going into this game. Here's the thing. They lead the league in rushing, and they're last in the league in passing. So I think that tells you all you need to know if you're a Buffalo Bills defense, right? You stop or you contain. I don't want to say stop because I don't think you can simply stop Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and those host of runners. But if you can contain Baltimore, then I think Buffalo will win this game. Because if you expect Lamar Jackson to drop back, like the Ravens get down 17, 20 points in the second half, they're not just going to be able to run their run offense anymore. They're going to have to throw it more. And that's when Lamar Jackson is more susceptible. So if you're the Bills, you're hoping to get out to a lead and force Baltimore to throw. If this is like a 3-point or 7-point game and the Ravens are able to run their offense like normal, then I give the edge to Baltimore because that running offense is so potent. We saw Lamar Jackson last week against Tennessee run and break off that 48-yard touchdown run.
Oh,
right? I mean, the dude is lightning in a bottle. So I'm like literally slightly by a hair leaning Baltimore's way. But on the flip side, the way that you mentioned in your opening statement, the way that Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen have gelled and meshed, that might be the best quarterback to wide receiver tandem that we currently have. I know we just got done talking about Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, but I think right now the hottest duo is Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is just unguardable, right? I know that Baltimore has a good secondary with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters and Jimmy Smith, but I wouldn't say that any one of those guys on their own can stop Stephon Diggs. It's going to have to be a complete team effort. So, like I said, man, it's so tough because you can make arguments for both these teams. I'll give a slight edge to Baltimore. I mean, this could be like a 24-23 game, or like, a very much one possession game and potentially even a 1-point game.
Yeah, no, and like I said, there's arguments to make for both teams. This is a tough one for us to pick. We're essentially saying both teams can win this game. So, Jared, you are picking the Ravens, though. If you had to, gun to your head, you have to pick who's winning. Who you got winning the game?
Yeah, I am. But as you can tell, I'm not confident about it. I mean, I'm not putting money on this game. There's no way I'm putting money on this game.
No, yeah. So I think I said this last week. It sort of worked. I think Tennessee, what ended up happening is at least I predicted why the Ravens would win, and that's stopping Derrick Henry. There's a lot more to stop if you're the Ravens defense this week in Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, John Brown. Solid running back core, not great by any means, but with Josh Allen being able to run, you add that to the mix of that. So the Ravens defense has a little bit more to deal with this week. And then when you look offensively, Lamar Jackson, he needs to be able to pass. Last week, he threw a really, really bad interception going long for one of their receivers that kept Tennessee in the game early in that first half. That kind of stuff can't happen against a Bills offense that will be able to score a touchdown almost at will on some of these drives. So I think Lamar, he needs to run like he did last week and pass better, even though they won. He needs to pass the ball better. The Ravens defense, I'm going to give them a slight edge over the Bills defense too. I think overall rushing and pass defense is a bit better for the Ravens. So there's that advantage as well. You also have Marlon Humphrey being able to cover Stephon Diggs. Marlon Humphrey, a top 10 corner in this league. Not the best, not Jalen Ramsey, but a guy that can at least somewhat stop Stephon Diggs. And you have Jimmy Smith on the other side as well. So a good cornerback tandem to stop at least the number one weapon on the Bills offense. And then when you look at the Bills, right, I think they have these advantages. Offensively, they're more balanced, right? I think they have the better overall quarterback at this point because Allen can throw the ball and can run. Is he as fast and dynamic as Lamar Jackson? No, but he has the chance to throw for 400 yards in a game, which Lamar Jackson I don't think can do. So you give him the advantage there. I think when you look at the Bills, you can have a strategy that's simple. Force Lamar to pass the ball. Just focus on Lamar Jackson not being able to run the ball. One of the reasons Tennessee lost to the Ravens last week is because Lamar was able to run the ball, right? Yeah. Can you stop Lamar Jackson from weaving in between four defenders and sprinting past your entire defense? No, that might happen. But for the rest of the game, you could stop him, right? And if you force him to pass, when you have guys like Marquise Brown that are kind of topsy-turvy some games, sometimes they play well, sometimes they're stopped. Tre'Davious White is on the Buffalo Bills. He's a top 10, top 5 corner. He'll He can stop Marquise Brown a bit. So I think the Bills have advantages there. I think when you look at it, I'm going to go with the team with a little better defense. I'm going to go with the team that can pound the rock, that has the running game for days. And I do think the momentum for the Ravens is a bit more, right? They get over the rivalry game in Tennessee. They make them look bad, right? They beat them. And the Bills, were one missed field goal away from going into overtime with Phil Rivers. So I think that you have the advantage in momentum for the Ravens. You have advantage on defense, and offense potentially can be better. So I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think Lamar takes another step above, and I'm going to go with the Ravens 24-20 in this game, winning by 4 points. All right, let's move on to Sunday. We got Browns-Chiefs. Jared, if we had a longer podcast today, if we had a little bit more time, I think we'd discuss that Steelers-Browns game and what the hell happened there. We won't necessarily. I will mention something about the game that kind of frustrates me about previewing this game. But nonetheless, we're just going to get into this matchup. You have one of the best teams, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, Patrick Mahomes versus one of the best running back tandems in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And, of course, Baker Mayfield leading this team. So, Jared, what's your hunch on this game, Browns at Kansas City?
Yeah, when I first saw this matchup, I was like, Chiefs all day. Like, it's not going to be a close game. Like, with Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell. I mean, like, how are you really beating this team, right? And then as the week's gone on, it's like Cleveland, their running game is so potent when you've got the best two-headed monster in the backfield with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And Baker Mayfield is playing lights out right now, right? And also, this Cleveland team is riding high. I've said this on Twitter, and I'll say this again. Cleveland won their Super Bowl last week, right? Like, it doesn't matter if Cleveland loses to Kansas City. If you're a Cleveland Browns fan, if you're a part of this organization, like the future is looking mighty bright, number one. Number two, it's like you beat your arch rival, your big brother in the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you not only beat them, you kicked their ass. Like you whooped them right out of the same 28-0 in the first quarter. So I think Cleveland's going to be coming in with a lot of momentum. And the fact that Kansas City's had a week off, I think it could be a good and a bad thing. A good thing because you get to rest your players. You got little nicks and bruises, an extra week to prepare and rest. But on the other hand, you're not coming in with that momentum that Cleveland is. So I can very easily see Cleveland coming out in the first quarter and potentially taking a 7-point or a 10-point lead. We saw in last year's playoffs, and I believe even 2 years ago as well, Kansas City, they get out to some slow starts, right? Like they lost. The Texans at one point, if I'm not mistaken, had like a 24-point lead on on the Chiefs last year. And even the Tennessee Titans had a lead on them as well. So the Chiefs, for some reason, when it comes to the playoffs, they tend to have slow starts. I don't know if they do it on purpose because they're like, we're so good. Like, we need to make this a game. Like, we want viewers to tune in for the whole game. Like, we don't want to just blow the team out in the first quarter. So in all seriousness, I can see Cleveland coming out and starting this game very well. But I think at the end of the day, when we get into the second half, the Chiefs just have too much offensive firepower. Like, I'm looking at Cleveland right now, and they're more than likely going to get their two corners and Denzel Ward and Kevin Johnson back from off of the COVID list, which is obviously going to help. They're going to need all the help they can get. But I still don't think that's going to be enough. Kansas City, way too much firepower. I see this game being like 35-24. Cleveland can score some points, but just it's going to be a double-digit win for the Chiefs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's when you look at the Chiefs, right, you initially think it's going to be a win, right? And I think that when you look at the Browns, what I was going to say about the Steelers-Browns game is it's frustrating for me because I don't know what to think about the Browns after that. You have this snap that goes over Big Ben's head. That's not the Browns doing anything. That's the Browns getting lucky in a touchdown. Some of those interceptions were not necessarily the worst throws in the world by Big Ben, just kind of miscommunications with their receivers and easy catches for the Browns. So they were getting the ball in this game almost like it was a high school matchup where one team is so much better than the other that they can't make a mistake. Yes, were they able to beat a good Steelers defense? Correct. But when your Steelers defense is always on the field and just getting pounded in this game, it's a little different. So I don't know what to think about this Browns team. It's almost like I have to start over. And when I start over, I would absolutely pick the Chiefs if this is the first round of the playoffs. So I'm going to base it like that. I give the Browns credit for winning and playing good, but there was a lot of things that went completely their way in that game. And as much as they won that game, the Steelers blew that and lost that game. Like that's kind of what happened there. So, I think of the Browns to give them a chance in this game. They have a running back tandem, right? If they can keep Patrick Mahomes off the field and really run the ball tough and make the correct passes like Baker Mayfield did last week, ticking the time off the clock, scoring touchdowns is a way you can win this game. I think Baker Mayfield has to play mistake-free football. No fumbles, smart passes, nothing too crazy. I know he's kind of a wild player, but you got to stay within yourself and have the best game plan and follow the game plan and play mistake-free football. And I think if you're the Browns defense, I think you look to stop Tyreek Hill in this game. I think if there's one guy you're looking, okay, let's just stop him. I think it helps your defense.
Over Travis Kelce? A guy
like, yeah.
Over Travis Kelce?
Tyreek Hill, much like Devontae Smith, can just burn you without even trying. So if you double team Tyreek Hill, we've seen that lead to success earlier this year with teams playing well against the Saints and in the past. So I think if the Browns can do those three things, they have a chance to win this game. But I mean, Jared, the Chiefs don't have to play their best game and they can win. Now, I have said this. I've been one of the people that said this, and not a lot of people are saying this. The Chiefs are a little full of themselves this year. Okay, I know they won the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has every commercial in the book. I guess Baker Mayfield does too.
Bold statement.
I'm just saying. So if the Chiefs play lazily like they have a lot later in this season, they haven't played a lot of talent. They played the Saints when Drew Brees was coming back from his brutal rib injury last week. Drew Brees was even talking about he thought he came back too early. So the Chiefs haven't really played a tough game since that Raiders game that was on Sunday Night Football, 35-31. The rest of these games have been fairly easy. And so they've been kind of in cruise control and almost have blown a couple of those games. So I think you don't want to take your foot off the gas pedal against the Browns because the Browns are a solid team. They may not be a Super Bowl contender, but they could beat you for sure. They have enough talent in Jarvis Landry and Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield, and Kareem Hunt to win this game. So I think the Chiefs need to focus as much as possible and not play, that fun style of football. Come out with a game plan. This is the playoffs. You have 2 games to get to the Super Bowl, 3 games to win it all, and just beat the crap out of the Browns, right? You can start celebrating and joking around when you're up by 21, right? But in the beginning of this game, I don't want to see lazy play calling. I don't want to see Mahomes try and trick passes and stuff like that. If he completes them, cool. But it's going to be very interesting if the Browns take time off the clock and they can stop Mahomes. And if they don't get going, right, Jared? If they don't get going and the Browns are taking time off the clock in the first half and getting a lead, that means there's less times for the Chiefs to come back. And so it's going to be a very interesting matchup. Yes, I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this game. But again, much like the Rams, I think the Browns have a chance in this game. And if the Chiefs play like they have the last 5 weeks, there's a chance the Browns win this game. But I'm going to go Chiefs 27-20 in this game in a 7-point victory. I can't go against Mahomes and Andy Reid. I'm interested to see next week Brown or Ravens or Bills if the Chiefs move forward. I think that's an awesome matchup no matter what. So at least we have look forward for that. If the Chiefs win this game. But yeah, I'm going to go Chiefs 27-20 in this ball game.
Yeah, no, if you picked against the Chiefs, I would cut this podcast right now. We'd be done. So I'm glad you didn't, because I didn't want to have to do that.
And so what was the score? What was the score you said for the Chiefs?
I said 35-24, 11 points. Okay. Double digits.
Yeah, what's interesting about this too is against good teams too, the Chiefs have not scored highly in a lot of these games. Besides that game against the Saints, they've kind of disappointed a bit against good teams. So it'll be interesting to see if those scores get as high as they have been. But again, I think they've been playing kind of crappy football lately. So if they can really play like they should beat the Browns fairly easily. But I'll give them the 7-point victory and give the Browns a chance. All right, Jerry, moving on to the last game of the weekend. You have Tampa Bay versus New Orleans, right? Last year, we've been talking about Jameis Winston and the Buccaneers coming into town to face Drew Brees. This year, we're talking about Tom Brady versus Drew Brees. I can't remember how many times this has happened. I know it's not happened in the playoffs. It's an awesome matchup. Buccaneers come off the win against the Washington football team. New Orleans, a very solid win against the Bears. But two teams that we would have said, all right, in a lot of years, these teams probably wouldn't have been in the playoffs, right? The Bears being the 7th seed, Washington being 6 and 9 or whatever they were this year. So both teams coming off wins, but coming off wins against essentially non-playoff teams or fringe playoff teams. Now they play each other. You have the history of the Saints winning the game on opening night. You have the history of the Saints absolutely destroying Tampa Bay on Sunday Night Football, 38-3. And you come in for the trilogy fight for the rubber match. And, the Buccaneers have been playing well coming into the playoff game last week. The Saints, you weren't sure what you were going to see. They impressed. Jared, what's your hunch? What's your thoughts on this game?
There's a lot to this game, man. You mentioned it, right? The Saints have already beat the Bucs twice this year. So I think the Bucs are going to have a big chip on their shoulder. I would say that the Buccaneers are probably playing or have a little more momentum right now. I think offensively they're clicking a little bit better. Tom Brady seems to have finally found a groove with his weapons. Obviously, Antonio Brown caught a touchdown pass against the Washington football team last week, and it was his first playoff touchdown pass in like 2 years, 3 years, something like that. So his confidence has gone up. Mike Evans, fortunately didn't hyperextend his knee last week, and he was able to play and be very, very, very effective. So he's going to be even more healthy for this matchup as well. So, Tampa Bay is coming in not only with a chip on their shoulder, wanting to not get skunked and lose 3 times to your division rival, but that offense is clicking. Plus, they're getting their 2 stud linebackers and Levante David and Devin White both back, right? So those are 2 big pieces to their linebacking core. But when you've beaten a team twice already, as the Saints have done, it's tough for me to go against that team until I see otherwise, right? And here's the thing. Alvin Kamara is in COVID protocol, doesn't practice at all, comes out, and he still, is effective for the Saints against the Bears. Michael Thomas, his first touchdown catch of the season was last week. Like, that is crazy to think about, when last year Michael Thomas led the league in receptions, and he goes from that superstar. He's still a great player, still a superstar, but obviously this year did not go the way that he thought. He's been injured. Drew Brees has been injured. They both seem to be healthy now, and he finally gets his first touchdown. So maybe his confidence is starting to move up. And when Drew Brees is connecting with Michael Thomas, that is one of the most lethal quarterback to receiver connections in all the NFL, right? You can't just pin your eyes on Alvin Kamara anymore. You've now got to double team Michael Thomas, which is going to leave open holes for Kamara. So, I mean, as much as I want to give this, or not give, but lean towards the Buccaneers, the Saints have already beat them twice. And like I said, until the Buccaneers can prove that they can get over that hump, I got to take the Saints. Plus, it's at home. Now, there's no fans, and it's not going to be that same raucous crowd, but still, Saints at home, just tough to beat in that dome.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting matchup. Obviously, you have Brady versus Brees, Sean Payton versus Bruce Arians, right? You have a talented, more balanced offense in the Saints versus some of the best receivers in the league all on one team, and then Tom Brady, right? A sort of formidable running game that's a little sketchy. And I think for this game, I point to that, right? When the Saints beat the Buccaneers 38-3, I believe the Buccaneers passed the ball 4 times during the game. No joke, 4 or 5 times. 4 or 5 pass attempts. Or excuse me, 4 or 5 rush attempts. Excuse me.
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that can't happen. The Buccaneers 100% have to commit to the run. Now, unfortunately, last week they lost Rojo in warmups, and then fortunately for them, Fournette was able to almost get 100 yards, a touchdown in that game. But they had to rely completely solely on Leonard Fournette. Hopefully, if you're the Buccaneers, you get Rojo back, but it doesn't matter. Leonard Fournette is a formidable running back enough. You need to commit to the run to allow Brady to get to Mike Evans, to get to Antonio Brown, to get to Chris Godwin, to get to Gronk, right? If they if they start getting down by 10 points and Bruce starts going to that no risk it, no biscuit offense, that is when Brady and the Patriots and Brady on the Buccaneers has always lost games. So they need to commit to the run, and they will absolutely have a chance. A balanced offense with Tom Brady is hard to beat no matter what. But then on the other side, you look at Drew Brees and the Saints. Right? Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, good running back team. Like you mentioned, Kamara and Murray played well last week. You have Michael Thomas back. You have weapons like Emmanuel Sanders and Jared Cook at tight end. The one thing that concerns me also about Tampa in this game, moving back to Tampa, they gave up 300 passing yards to Taylor Heineke last week. The rookie sensation that we won't unfortunately be able to talk about on this podcast. We'll talk about at the end of the season after the Super Bowl. But they gave up 300 yards to Heineke. So why do we think the Buccaneers will be able to stop Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, Taysom Hill, and Michael Thomas? Right, Jared? How does that make a lot of sense? So I think when you look at this game, I actually disagree with you. I think the Saints are coming into this game with more momentum because they dominated a Chicago defense and really won that game 21-3 and could have won it a lot worse if they had gotten the ball. They'd finished on the goal line at the end of that game. I think it's absolutely Saints momentum, and I think everything kind of has to go right for the Bucs in this game to win, because I think a healthy Kamara, a relatively healthy Thomas, and a healthier Drew Brees is beneficial. Now, when you look at the Buccaneers defense too, I think they need to force Drew Brees to beat them. I said this last week, right? I said for Chicago, make Drew Brees and his broken ribs be the guy that beats you. He can't throw downfield that well. It's a lot of short passes. It's similar to the Steelers' offense of that chip away, run game, all that stuff. So maybe if you focus a bit on stopping the run, if you're the Buccaneers, you then force Drew Brees to beat you. Yes, every other year, that would be the stupidest thing you could possibly say. But I think this year it might be the end of the line for Brees. He's beat up. He might not be he's clearly not the same Drew Brees we've seen the last 5 years. I think if you're the Buccaneers, you try to stop the run. You make Drew Brees beat you. If you're the Saints, you force Tom Brady to pass and you stop the run. So similar strategy there. And I think predicting this game, I'm going to go with the Saints getting a 31-28 victory over Tampa Bay and Brees continuing his career. Tom Brady will be back next year. Maybe there'll be questions about Bruce Arians, but I think when you look at Brady versus Brees and you look at Sean Payton versus Arians and you look at momentum, I'm going to give the edge to the Saints and head coaching. I think Brees is a little bit more able to do more than Tom Brady at this stage of his career. And then I think momentum swings the Saints' way. So Saints 31-28 in this game.
Yeah, I want to go back to your point that you made about the whole, Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit thing. And listen, the fact that the Bucs rushed for a combined 142 yards attributed to Tom Brady being able to throw for 381 yards and 2 touchdowns. What I think is going to happen, though, is Brady's getting more comfortable in this offense. And obviously, Brady wants to be the guy, right? He wants to be able to chuck it around. I think he likes to have that open flexibility because let's remember his last 5-6 years in New England, he wasn't chucking the ball around like this. Tom Brady didn't have 381 yard passing game performances. He had the touchdowns, but he wasn't chucking it all over the field like he's been able to do more recently with this Bucs offense, right? So I think if Brady, they're going to want to continue that passing game. Obviously, that rushing attack is going to need to be formidable in order for the passing game to succeed. But I think more or less Tom Brady is going to want to throw in key situations. If we get down to the fourth quarter, if it's a close game and it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, I think no doubt they're throwing it. There's some situations where if you're going to go for 2 or something like that, you might run the ball. I think no doubt if this game is close, which I think it will be, they're going to put the ball in Tom Brady's hands, right? They're not going to leave it up to a running scenario. They're going to say, Tom, you are the 6-time Super Bowl champion. Go win this game for us if that's what it comes down to. Second thing I want to mention, which neither of us have said so far, let's not forget the little matchup that we have going on. Not little, the big matchup we have going on with Mike Evans and Lattimore. right? So these two have a huge history. Obviously, Evans has been in the league for like 7 or 8 years. Lattimore's only been in the league for 3 or 4. But literally every time these two meet and they match up against each other, a fight ensues. Always. There's always talking. There's always chirping. And there's always some extracurricular activities. So if you're the Saints, I think you want that. You want Mike Evans to get pissed off and kind of take his focus off of what he's supposed to be doing and more or less put it on to Lattimore. Because, I mean, that's just one less guy that the Saints will then have to cover, right? You still got to deal with Antonio Brown, who, like I mentioned, I think his confidence is starting to grow. And you got Chris Godwin, who just caught his first postseason touchdown pass last week against the Washington football team. So there's still threats on the outside. But if I'm the Saints defense, I'm going up to Marshawn Lattimore and I'm saying, hey, man, do whatever you got to do to get in Mike Evans' head. Rough him up a little bit. You know, after the play, give him a little elbow or something. I don't know. Talk about his family. Do something to get him off of his game. And then, like I said, that is potentially one less threat that the Saints have to deal with. So that'll be an interesting kind of one-on-one matchup that I'm looking to watch. But at the end, I think the Saints take this. I'm going Saints 30, Tampa Bay 27. I think it's a field goal game. What did you say? Did you say?
I said 31-28. So yeah, we're thinking very.
It's a field goal game. Field goal game.
Yeah. No, and Jared, you brought up a good point. I'll bring this up too. I have the stats on penalties for these two games. Remember at the beginning of the year, the Buccaneers were the most penalized team in the league. Well, actually, what ended up happening is New Orleans was worse with penalties at the end of the season, and they were actually second most in yards against. So again, you're mentioning Marshawn Lattimore, but if we get into these personal fouls and stuff like that, when we're talking about a 31-28 game, that's how teams lose. So again, that's a big factor in this game. Who will be the least penalized team? Who will, have the least penalized yards? That's a big factor in this game, and that probably most likely will swing who wins this game if there's big scenarios on pass interferences or these fights and stuff like that. It's essentially like this, Jared. Who's going to hit second, right? If they get in a fight,
they never catch the first dude. It's always the second dude.
So it'll be interesting, but I just want to bring that up. Saints number 2 in penalty yards on the season. And that's counting the playoff game last week. So add a little bit more because of the playoffs. But even without that, they were third coming into the game, or they were third coming into last week. Baltimore actually is third right now. Something to look at in the Bills game as well. But so very, very interesting. Tampa Bay has fixed their issues with penalties, but will revert back when they're playing a rival, right? When they got beat 38-3, when they got beat by over 10 points the first game. You never know. Interesting stuff. But yeah, all right, Jared, that's going to be the end of this podcast. We'll be back next week for NFL Conference Championship week. We'll be talking about hopefully Kyrie Irving coming back or this Nets team playing their first game back. Man. Yeah, no, but it should be interesting. Again, I believe, Jared, did we agree on every single game? We agreed on the winner for every single game. I think we both had
if I'm not
Packers.
mistaken, yeah. I got Packers, Ravens, Chiefs, Saints.
Yeah, I got the same thing. So we agree. Sometimes that's unfortunate on this podcast, but guys, we analyzed it for you. We gave you what's supposed to happen. So take it for what it is, and we'll see what ends up working out for us. I'll say this, Jared. I was 4 for 2 last week in games. The Steelers I never expected to get beat, and the Seahawks really. I gotta tell you, I have been so bad betting on NFC West teams this year. It's ridiculous. And that's even including my Cardinals. So hopefully, if I bet against the Rams, hopefully they won't screw me and I get the Packers to win this game. But it should be interesting. But yeah, we'll be back next week talking about all this playoff stuff and much, much more. But for this podcast, we are done. I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.